Chapter 31, The Police State. Within the next generation, I believe that the world's rulers will discover that infant conditioning and narco-hypnosis are more efficient, as instruments of government, than clubs and prisons, and that the lust for power can be just as completely satisfied by suggesting people into loving their servitude as by flogging and kicking them into obedience. This is an excerpt from a letter written by Aldous Huxley to George Orwell. After the false flag atrocity of the 9/11 incident, where the Twin Towers were hit as well as the Pentagon, the blame for these events was placed solely at the feet of so-called terrorists and terrorism. In turn, the Patriot Act was passed by Congress, and what this act does is it limits civil liberties within the United States. This massive new act was written so quickly after 9/11 that I can only assume that it was already a work in progress, if not completely finished before 9/11 happened. The act was brought in after concerns about 9/11 and also the Stage 2001 anthrax attacks. The anthrax attacks occurred while Bush was pushing the Patriot Act through. Two potential blocks to getting it passed were Senator Tom Daschle and Senator Tom Leahy. Amazingly, both received anthrax letters at their D.C. offices. Coincidence? Of course not. The FBI now officially has the power to search telephone, email and financial records without a court order. They can also look both at business records and library records. There is no connection between the 9/11 attacks and what is in this legislation. This is a quote by Nadine Strossen, professor of law at New York University and president of the American Civil Liberties Union, talking about the Patriot Act. I expect that not every member of Congress had a chance to look over it in detail. This act in turn allows the government greater scope to monitor and control its citizens. In order to do this more effectively, the Department of Homeland Security was created in 2002 to make U.S. citizens feel supposedly safer under the guise of the potential of other terrorist, CIA-funded, acts happening in the United States. Americans are stuck with the police spy state that includes military police murdering 3 Americans every day and injuring countless others. Since 9/11, the government has used nationalism as cover for implementing measures to control the population. Secret evidence, closed trials, false imprisonment, warrantless searches, involuntary drugging, the seizing of property, all seem like something from a 1930s totalitarian regime, but fear has pushed many Americans into a zombie-like passiveness to authority. This is a quote by Jim Marrs, probably the single most extremist, tyrannical and dangerous bill introduced in the Senate in the last several decades, far beyond the horrendous habeas abolishing military commissions act. This is a quote by author Glenn Greenwald about the Patriot Act. Anyone who questions the actions of the Illuminati-controlled federal government is targeted as a terrorist. This is the primary reason for 9/11 and its subsequent Patriot Act and Homeland Security. This is a quote by J. Michael Thomas Hayes. In the UK, we compete fiercely with America as in the acts of spying on its nation's citizens, and we may even be number 1 in the world because there are CCTV cameras everywhere in the UK, but it is not a police brutality state of affairs here, yet. This police spy state sits nicely on a foundation of lies that includes weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and the 9/11 false flag, to name only 2 of many. The most extreme surveillance in the history of Western democracy. This is a quote by Edward Snowden in November 2016, on the potential introduction of the new UK surveillance powers. In Britain, The total amount of public money spent on installing and operating CCTV cameras alone during the 2007 to 2010 period was £321,331,453.18. There are currently 5 million CCTV cameras in the UK to cover a population of 60 million. This equates to 1 camera for every 12 people. This is a quote by John Hamer. In November 2016, the UK was about to become one of the world's foremost surveillance states by allowing the police and the intelligence agencies to spy on UK citizens to a degree that was unprecedented for a democracy. The UN privacy chief called it worse than scary. It was called the Investigatory Powers Bill or the Snoopers Charter. The new legislation was cleared by politicians and was given royal assent. Because of the recent Brexit result, the potential legislation was never given too much media coverage, although a petition against the potential laws received over 100,000 votes, which then had to be debated upon in Parliament. The bill would have meant that the government would keep a record of every website that each citizen visits for up to a year. This includes apps on phones and the metadata of calls. England currently has more than 2 million cameras in airports, train stations, streets and neighbourhoods. This is a quote by Jim Marrs in 2011. Home Secretary Amber Rudd hailed the passing of the Act, calling it world-leading legislation that provided unprecedented transparency and substantial privacy protection. Jim Killock, Executive Director of the Open Rights Group, responded to the Home Secretary's world-leading claim and said that she is right. It is one of the most extreme surveillance laws ever passed in a democracy. In December 2016, thankfully the European Court of Justice stepped in and declared that the indiscriminate collection of data was against EU law, and EU judges said that communications data could only be retained if it was used to fight serious crime. At least the judges in Europe can see sense. Unfortunately, as we will be leaving the European Union, this new legislation being passed in the Snoopers Charter invading the UK citizens' privacy is now only a matter of time, I believe. In Britain, there is no need for tanks in the streets. In its managerial indifference to the freedoms it is said to hold dear, bourgeois Britain has allowed Parliament this century to create a surveillance state with 3,000 new criminal offences and laws, more than for the whole of the previous century. Powers of arrest and detention have never been greater. The police have the impunity to kill. Asylum seekers can be restrained to death on commercial flights, and should fellow passengers object, anti-terrorism laws will deal with them. Abroad, British military colludes with torturers and death squads. This is a quote by John Pilger, investigative journalist. Mentioning snooping, India Ashok at the International Business Times reported in December 2016 that British councils used Reaper to conduct mass surveillance on people for over 5 years. Councils were authorized to conduct over 55,000 days of surveillance, which included spying on dog walkers and people feeding pigeons, among others. Councils used the government's Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, REPA, to collect evidence, make use of listening devices, private detectives and cameras. Globally, governments regularly intercept your personal conversations, copy your documents, and read your electronic mail, spying on whomever they wish, whenever they wish. This, in the name of national security, is justified to you as a means to maintaining stability in a world of terrorists, enemies and rogue states. This is a quote by Patricia Corey. In December 2016, AFP reported that U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry had warned of the danger of authoritarian populism sweeping across many Western democracies and amazingly cautioned against backsliding on basic freedoms. He told a meeting in Germany that every chip away at the fundamentals of freedom is actually an ugly building block in the road to tyranny. He carries on to say that a free press, religious liberty, political openness, transparency in governance, a flourishing civil society, these are the signs of a confident and thriving nation. Excuse me, Mr. Kerry, I've just had to pick myself up off of the floor because where I've been laughing so much at what you have said, I fell off of my chair. His acting is so good, he should be in the movies. Most local police in the US no longer wear the traditional blue uniforms, and the slogan "to serve and protect" has largely been eliminated from their vehicles. Today, many officers in the large urban centers wear black and, in serious situations, don body armor based on the German World War II design. This is a quote by Jim Mars. After the Brexit vote in the summer of 2016 in the UK, the end of the Renzi regime in Italy and the voting into power of Donald Trump in the US, the elite must be in panic station mode in order to regain the control that they once had before the sheeple started to awaken, thanks to the internet and alternative news and authors. Therefore they must be planning ways to eliminate these avenues of truth so that the masses can get back to sleep. To do this and to regain control, the elite will declare war on cash because it gives people freedom and makes purchases and transactions that are harder to monitor. The New York Times, The Washington Post and CNN among others are already trying to get $100 bills banned in the United States. The cashless society will be brought in because cashless means further control of the masses. They will declare war on vehicles because a vehicle gives you a relative degree of freedom without permission from the elite or government. They cannot always be tracked, although your cell mobile phone can be. Governments prefer mass transit because it allows the sheeple to be herded through security checkpoints with facial recognition systems and monitoring through CCTV. This control could easily be used when the technology of driverless vehicles is fully operational. Governments will claim that this benefit will bring insurance costs right down, but this is only a transparent ploy in order to further monitor, watch and control us all. They will declare war on the internet and dissenting literature and news. Books and information such as this one will be banned and will only be available underground. Information that awakens people to what is really going on will be classed as offensive and it will be illegal to own or to read it. The wide range of subjects found in books in libraries will be curtailed and many libraries will be closed, which is already happening in the UK. Collectors of literature and even art will be classed as enemies of the state. We are seen as expendable, or at least we will definitely be after the technology in the form of robots replaces us. Robots don't consume the planet's resources like humans do, and they don't need to be paid either. They only tolerate the obedient workers that don't want or need to think for themselves. They tolerate the slaves because the slaves pay their money back into their created system. The federal government is training its enforcers that people who don't believe everything they see on Fox News, CNN or read in the New York Times are to be treated as a threat and a potential violent domestic terrorist. This is a quote by author Paul Joseph Watson. Did you know that the CIA is funding companies that specialize in social media spying? Its venture capital arm In-Q-Tel has made investments in 4 social media mining and surveillance companies. Journalist Li Fang found in April 2016 that the companies included Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and one other. He points to Payther, which is a social media intelligence company whose product named Dunami is already used by the FBI. In case it has not yet come clear in your minds, We are telling you that the secret government intends to use whatever means necessary to impose no less than a totalitarian state from Alaska to Zanzibar. They envision a borderless world where every aspect of your lives would be openly determined by a central power, a world where freedom of thought and action would be annihilated forever, supplanted by absolute obedience on mental, emotional and physical levels. This is a quote by Patricia Corey. The policing of Facebook is a great example of how the world is really a lunatic asylum. My case in point leads us to the story of a Marine veteran named Brandon Raub. In August 2012, it was reported that Brandon was taken into custody after federal agents questioned him about Facebook posts that he had made that were critical of the U.S. government. Representatives from the FBI, Secret Service and Chesterfield County PD visited his home. They questioned him about his posts on Facebook that were critical of the official story of 9/11. They handcuffed him and took him in a car to John Randolph. He was then sentenced to up to 30 days further confinement in a VA psych ward, and a judge then signed an order to have him involuntarily admitted to the Veterans Hospital in Salem. Brandon Raub had served in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's the thanks you get for serving your country in false wars on terrorism. The Rutherford Institute stated that Raub had been detained against his will due to alleged concerns by government officials that his Facebook posts were controversial and terrorist in nature. Is that how justice in America works? When a war veteran exercises their First Amendment rights, they then get arrested, before undergoing psychological evaluations before being put in a psychiatric ward. Only in the lunatic asylum could this happen. Executive Director of the Rutherford Institute, John Whitehead, said that 20,000 people are committed under similar circumstances in Virginia every year, and said that means a lot of people are disappearing under the pretext of mental illnesses. Whitehead also said that Raub called him from hospital to say that a psychiatrist had told him that he was going to be brainwashed and have medication forced upon him. Whitehead goes on to say that this should be a wake-up call to Americans that the police state is here. Raub is no different from the majority of Americans who use their private Facebook pages to post a variety of content. Yet another reason to stay off of all social media, the same social media that has a negative impact on society. Many users feel that their personal data is supposedly safe because they have set high levels of security settings on them, but that isn't the case. According to a 2010 Northeastern University and Max Planck Institute for Software Systems study, using an algorithm, researchers were able to infer many personal traits merely from friends lists, including educational level, university attended, hometown and other private data. I believe, if you take what has been happening since post 9/11, you are seeing the establishment of a surveillance society. People don't realize the extent to which we are already surveyed in many, many different ways. The extent to which vast amounts of our own transactional data in all forms, all electronic forms, emails, tweets, bank records and everything else are all subject, or suspect in terms of surveillance. This is a quote by Thomas Drake, former senior executive at the NSA. Studies have shown a link between social media and negative consequences that included impaired brain hormones, stress, aggression, anxiety, depression and others. People lie about their fantastic lives on social media in order to impress their friends. This creates depression in people because they believe such lies to be true when they are in fact false. Some people even retweet posts and updates that were originally posted years before. A previous partner of mine used to do this in order to pretend that their life was better than it currently was, which I found very amusing. In the UK, the BBC reported in May 2014 that nearly 2,000 children had been questioned over social media abuse that led to bullying. Sky News reported that 1,200 were then either charged, given a caution or fined. Figures show that 20,000 adults were also investigated between 2001 and 2014. Out of those, 11,292 were subject to some kind of police action. The Metropolitan Police had the highest figure, investigating 2,099 incidents, with Hertfordshire Police coming second with 1,042 cases. In November 2016, Air Batroui of the Associated Press reported that a mother of 6 was jailed for challenging Saudi taboos. Saad al-Shamari posted a series of tweets on Twitter about the thick beards worn by Saudi clerics. She posted images of men with beards, an Orthodox Jew, a hipster, a communist, an Ottoman caliph, a Sikh and a Muslim. She wrote that having a beard was not what made a man holy or a Muslim. She spent 3 months in prison without charge for agitating public opinion. She is not allowed to travel abroad, only in the lunatic asylum. Again in November 2016, it was reported by Saqib Shah that a mum in California had been arrested for selling homemade food through Facebook. Meriza Rulas from Stockton faced the potential of up to 1 year in jail. Undercover investigators in San Joaquin County tracked her and others for over a year. Again, only in the lunatic asylum. At the end of December 2016, David Mathers reported that U.S. Customs and Border Protection are now asking foreign travelers for their social media information. The ESTA form, which is a required component of the visa waiver application, now includes a section for travelers to provide their usernames for their social media accounts. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection argued that the policy is designed to help identify potential threats. Only in the lunatic asylum. There's no way to rule innocent men. The only power any government has is the power to crack down on criminals. Well, when there aren't enough criminals, one makes them. One declares so many things to be a crime that it becomes impossible for men to live without breaking laws. Who wants a nation of law-abiding citizens? What's there in that for anyone? But just pass the kind of laws that can neither be observed nor enforced nor objectively interpreted, and you create a nation of lawbreakers, and then you cash in on guilt. This is a quote by Ayn Rand, author of Atlas Shrugged. Mentioning travel, Mike Masnick reported in January 2014 that a former TSA, Transportation Security Administration, agent explained that full-body scanners didn't work but did let him see you naked. Masnick reported that the agents targeted attractive women and said that they have a long list of official-sounding code names for attractive women so they can alert each other. The former TSA agent said that they're shit. We wouldn't be able to distinguish plastic explosives from body fat, and that guns were practically invisible if they were turned sideways in a pocket. Masnick believes that the real reason that they were installed in airports had nothing to do with terrorist threats, but that former DHS boss Michael Chertoff was getting rich by selling them to the U.S. government agencies that he used to run. According to U.S. government propaganda, terrorist cells are spread throughout America, making it necessary for the government to spy on all Americans and violate most other constitutional protections. Among President Bush's last words as he left office was the warning that America would soon be struck again by Muslim terrorists. If America were infected with terrorists, we would not need the government to tell us. We would know it from events. As there are no events, the U.S. government substitutes warnings in order to keep alive the fear that causes the public to accept pointless wars, the infringement of civil liberties, national ID cards, and the inconveniences and harassments when they fly. The most obvious indication that there are no terrorist cells is that not a single neocon has been assassinated. This is a quote by Paul Craig Roberts. According to Jim Marrs in The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, the Tsar machines emit terahertz, THz, radiation that, according to some studies, deposits energy in the body that can uncouple DNA strands. Scientists at the Center for Nonlinear Studies at Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico found that the THZ creates bubbles in the double strand that can interfere with the progress of gene expression, DNA replication and the absorption of oxygen into the cells. In 2010, the University of California's biochemistry and biophysics professor, John W. Sedat, and 3 other professors wrote to Barack Obama warning that there is good reason to believe that these scanners will increase the risk of cancer to children and other vulnerable populations. The USA Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, the Tsar, the FDA, the CIA, renditions, assassinations, multiple and continuous wars, torture, bailouts, inflation, false flag events, secrecy, illegal searches, spying on citizens, private property confiscations and much more is now commonplace. It is now considered to be a crime to grow your own food, film the police, to sell lemonade on street corners, to protest and in many cases to speak out against the state. This is a quote by Gary E. Burnett. Jim Marrs reported in The $1 Trillion Conspiracy that when George W. Bush was in power, he ordered the NSA to monitor Americans without seeking warrants from the Special Intelligence Court, and in 2006 it was revealed that the NSA had already been collecting phone records from millions of Americans using AT&T data, Verizon and Bell South data. During the Clinton administration, new regulations meant that banks reported to the government any large deposits, withdrawals or unusual activity from the public. Have you learned that the secret government is now setting up a 24/7 total surveillance system involving satellites, aircraft, drones, special trucks, vans, autos, cell phones, Wi-Fi advanced technology, in order to preemptively intercept any emerging spontaneous mass populism as effectively as possible? This is a quote by Preston James.